Ruby Franke entered the world on January 18, 1982, in Tremonton, Utah, a small town cradled in the shadow of the Wasatch Range. Born Ruby Griffiths to Chad and Jennifer Griffiths, she was the second of 4 daughters in a family anchored by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Her childhood unfolded in a home where Mormon doctrine was not merely practiced but lived with an intensity that shaped every breath she took. Sundays meant long hours at church, weekdays brought family prayer, and evenings were filled with scripture study around the kitchen table. Ruby's father, a stern man with a commanding presence, instilled in his daughters a reverence for authority and a belief that discipline was love's truest form. Her mother, softer but equally devout, taught Ruby to see motherhood as a divine calling, a sacred duty to mold souls for eternity. Growing up, Ruby was quiet, studious, and eager to please, traits that masked a growing rigidity, a seed of absolutism that would one day bloom into something monstrous. In her teenage years, Ruby attended Box Elder High School, where she excelled academically but kept a small circle of friends, mostly fellow Mormons who shared her worldview. She was not one for rebellion. Instead, she clung to rules, finding comfort in their structure. After graduating, she enrolled at Utah State University, where she met Kevin Franke, a thoughtful engineering student with a gentle demeanor. They married in 2000, a union blessed by their faith and celebrated in a temple ceremony that sealed them for eternity in Mormon theology. Kevin soon joined the faculty at Brigham Young University, and Ruby embraced her role as a homemaker, giving birth to their first child, Sherry, in 2003. 5 more followed over the next decade: Chad in 2005, Abby in 2007, Julie in 2009, Russell in 2011, and Eve in 2013. The Frankes settled in Springville, Utah, a picturesque city of green lawns and red brick homes, where they built a life that seemed to embody the American dream. In 2015, Ruby launched 8 Passengers, a YouTube channel that catapulted her family into the digital spotlight. The name reflected their household of 8, and the content promised an unfiltered look at their lives. With Kevin's steady income and Ruby's knack for storytelling, they purchased a sprawling 2-story home at 1491 South 1900 East, complete with a basement and a backyard trampoline. Ruby filmed relentlessly, uploading videos every Monday through Friday at 6 a.m. sharp, each one a polished vignette of family chaos and charm. Early clips showed Sherry's first day of high school, Chad's soccer games, and Abby's piano recitals, all narrated by Ruby's upbeat voice. By 2017, the channel boasted over 1 million subscribers, and by its peak in 2020, it reached 2.5 million. Sponsorships rolled in from brands like HelloFresh and Audible, and Ruby's inbox overflowed with fan mail praising her authenticity. But beneath the glossy surface, a shadow was lengthening, its edges sharpening with every upload. The first signs of trouble emerged in 2019, when viewers noticed Ruby's parenting veering into harsh territory. In one video, she grounded Chad for a month after he hid Julie's doll, his face crumpling as she lectured him on camera. In another, she withheld dinner from Russell, then 7, because he forgot to clean his plate, her tone icy as she explained that consequences build character. Subscribers began to murmur, but Ruby brushed off criticism, citing her Mormon values of obedience and accountability. The tipping point came in June 2020, when a video revealed that Chad, now 15, had been sleeping on a beanbag in the living room for 7 months. Ruby explained it was punishment for pranking Russell, claiming he'd lost bedroom privileges until he earned them back. The comment section erupted, with some calling it innovative discipline and others labeling it abuse. That November, Ruby doubled down, recounting how she refused to bring Eve, then 6, lunch at school after the child forgot her meal. When the school called, Ruby told the teacher Eve needed to learn responsibility, her voice devoid of warmth. A petition on change.org soon garnered 15,000 signatures, accusing Ruby and Kevin of child neglect and urging Utah's Division of Child and Family Services to intervene. The agency investigated but closed the case in December 2020, finding insufficient evidence of actionable harm. Still, the backlash grew, and sponsors began to pull away. By 2021, Ruby's marriage was fraying. Kevin later revealed that tensions had simmered for years, fueled by Ruby's obsession with control and his reluctance to challenge her. That summer, she demanded he leave their Springville home, citing a need for space. He complied, moving into an apartment, while maintaining sporadic contact with the children. Ruby's online presence faltered as 8 passengers lost subscribers, its once vibrant community fractured by controversy. In July 2022, YouTube terminated the channel without warning, citing violations of its community guidelines, likely tied to the mounting abuse allegations. Undaunted, Ruby forged a new path, aligning herself with Jodi Hildebrandt, a figure whose own history cast a long, troubling shadow. Jodi, born in 1969, had built Connections, a life coaching service in St. George, Utah, promising to heal families through strict Mormon principles. But her past was checkered. In 2007, Utah regulators had reprimanded her for breaching client confidentiality, and former clients accused her of planting paranoid ideas, like urging a mother to sever ties with her husband over unfounded suspicions. Ruby, however, saw Jodi as a mentor, a kindred spirit who understood her vision of radical parenting. Together, they launched Connections on YouTube and Moms of Truth on Instagram in late 2022, offering workshops and videos on disciplining children to align with divine will. Ruby's rhetoric grew sharper, her tone more apocalyptic. She spoke of spiritual warfare, of children as battlegrounds for good and evil, her eyes gleaming with fervor in live streams filmed in Jodi's sleek Ivans home. By May 2023, Ruby had relocated there with Russell and Eve, leaving her 4 older children with Kevin or scattered in their own lives. Jodi's residence at 1492 West Shinnecock Drive was a modern fortress, 4,500 square feet of beige stucco, 4 bedrooms, and a basement with a safe room, all perched on a quiet cul-de-sac overlooking Snow Canyon State Park. To outsiders, it was a sanctuary of order and faith. Inside, it became a house of horrors. The abuse began almost immediately, its brutality escalating with each passing week. Ruby and Jodi transformed the home into what prosecutors later likened to a concentration camp, stripping Russell and Eve of every human comfort. Beds were replaced with thin mats on the concrete basement floor, blankets forbidden even as desert nights dipped into the 40s. Food became a weapon, meals were withheld for up to 3 days, leaving the children dizzy with hunger, their ribs pressing against taut skin. When they ate, it was scraps, stale bread, a smear of peanut butter, doled out as rewards for compliance. Water was rationed to a few sips, their lips cracking and tongues swelling from dehydration. Ruby forced them into relentless labor, turning the home into a perverse work camp. Russell, 12 and barely 90 pounds, hauled 50-pound boxes of Jodi's coaching materials up and down the basement stairs, his knees buckling under the strain. Eve, 9 and frail, was sent outside to run laps on the unpaved driveway, her bare feet bloodied by sharp rocks and scorched by the August sun, which climbed to 105 degrees. The physical torment grew more sadistic. Ruby kicked Russell in the stomach with her hiking boots, leaving purple welts across his abdomen. She held his head underwater in the bathtub, counting seconds as he thrashed, then yanked him up gasping, his face pale with terror. She smothered his mouth and nose with her palms, pressing until his eyes bulged, only relenting when he went limp. Eve endured her own hell. Jodi ordered her to leap into a patch of prickly pear cactus near the garage, her screams piercing the air as spines embedded in her legs and arms. When she hesitated, Jodi shoved her, watching as the child fell face first into the thorns. Russell's wrists and ankles were bound with climbing rope, the knots so tight they cut into his flesh, then wrapped with silver duct tape to conceal the oozing sores beneath. Jodi smeared his wounds with a paste of cayenne pepper and honey, the sting so intense he bit his tongue to stifle screams. Ruby shaved Eve's head with kitchen shears, not once but 3 times over the summer, leaving her scalp raw and her identity stripped away. The psychological warfare was relentless, a calculated campaign to break their spirits. Ruby and Jodi preached that Russell and Eve were vessels of sin, possessed by demons that only pain could exorcise. They forced the children to recite confessions, hours spent kneeling on the tile floor admitting to fabricated evils, laziness, deceit, rebellion. Ruby loomed over them, her voice a low growl, promising salvation through suffering. She told Russell he was a snake, a creature destined to crawl in filth, and that she'd crush his evil before it consumed him. Eve, she said, was a liar whose tongue would rot unless purified by fire. The children internalized this venom, their self-worth dissolving into a void of guilt and fear. Ruby documented it all in a spiral-bound journal, her handwriting tight and meticulous. Entries from July 9 to August 27, 2023, catalogued the torment with a clinical detachment that chilled investigators. On July 11, she wrote of whipping Russell with a leather belt until he bled, noting his silence as proof of defiance. On August 3, she described dunking his head in the toilet and poking his sunburned back with a cactus spine, marveling that he didn't flinch. On August 19, she detailed starving Eve for 2 days after the girl wet herself, calling it a victory over her weakness. The nightmare ended on August 30, 2023, when Russell seized a fleeting chance at freedom. While Jodi was upstairs and Ruby slept, he pried open a basement window, its frame rusted from disuse, and crawled out into the dawn. Barefoot, wearing only a torn t-shirt and shorts, he staggered across the cul-de-sac to 1488 West Shinnecock Drive. He knocked on the door of Wes Ashcraft, a retiree sipping coffee on his porch. Ashcraft froze at the sight, a boy so thin his cheekbones jutted like blades, duct tape dangling from his wrists, his eyes wide with panic. Russell whispered for food, water, and police, his voice hoarse from disuse. Ashcraft ushered him inside, hands trembling as he dialed 911 at 10:53 a.m. Within minutes, Washington County Sheriff's deputies arrived, their radios crackling as they approached Jodi's home. A search warrant was executed by 11:30 a.m., and officers found Eve curled in a second-floor closet, her body folded into itself, her shaved head glistening with sweat. She refused to speak, her breath shallow, until a female officer coaxed her out after 4 agonizing hours. Paramedics rushed both children to St. George Regional Hospital, where doctors documented their condition. Russell weighed just 62 pounds, Eve 44, their bodies riddled with scars, burns, and infections. Ruby and Jodi were arrested at 1:15 p.m., handcuffed as neighbors gaped from their lawns. The investigation unfolded with grim precision. Police seized Ruby's journal, Jodi's laptops, and a cache of security footage showing the children's torment in grainy detail. Russell's ropes and Eve's bloodied shoes were bagged as evidence, each item a mute witness to the cruelty. Interviews with the older Franke children painted a broader picture. Sherry, now 20, recalled Ruby slapping her at age 5 for spilling juice, the sting lingering decades later. Chad, 18, described being locked in the garage overnight as punishment, the cold seeping into his bones. The Utah Division of Child and Family Services took custody of all 4 minor Frankes, Abby, Julie, Russell, and Eve, placing them with relatives under strict supervision. On August 31st, Ruby called Kevin from Purgatory Correctional Facility, her voice defiant as she claimed the devil had orchestrated her downfall and that the children's injuries were lies. Kevin hung up, his hands shaking, later telling police he hadn't seen Russell or Eve since July 2022, barred by Jodi's edict. The legal reckoning began swiftly. On September 5, 2023, Ruby and Jodi were indicted on 6 counts each of felony aggravated child abuse with injury, a second-degree charge carrying up to 15 years per count. Washington County Attorney Eric Clark led the prosecution, his team poring over 1,200 pages of evidence, including medical reports detailing Russell's lacerated liver and Eve's septic foot wounds. Public outrage swelled, with vigils held outside the Ivins courthouse and #JusticeForFrankeKids trending on X. On December 18, Ruby entered a plea deal, admitting guilt to 4 counts in exchange for 2 being dropped. In court, she stood before Judge John J. Walton, her hair lank and eyes sunken, weeping as she apologized to her children for losing her way in a fog of delusion. She blamed Jodi, claiming 4 years of manipulation had warped her mind. Jodi pleaded guilty to 4 counts on December 27, her statement colder, asserting she'd acted out of love to spare the children a trial. Both agreements mandated consecutive sentencing, with Ruby pledging to testify against Jodi if called. The sentencing hearing on February 20, 2024, was a theater of anguish. The courtroom at 206 West Tabernacle Street buzzed with reporters, victims' advocates, and Franke family members, Kevin flanked by Sherry and Chad in the front row. Clark presented a 90-minute case, projecting photos of Russell's skeletal frame and Eve's scarred legs, his voice breaking as he likened the home to a death camp. He urged a maximum penalty, arguing Jodi's psychological dominance made her the architect of the horror. Ruby's attorney, Lamar Windward, countered that she'd been a pawn, her faith exploited by Jodi's charisma. Jodi's counsel, Douglas Terry, painted her as a misguided healer, not a sadist. Judge Walton, a veteran jurist with a stern gaze, sentenced each to 4 consecutive terms of 1 to 15 years, totaling 4 to 60 years, though Utah's cap of 30 years per case meant the parole board would decide their fate. Ruby collapsed into sobs, clutching a tissue as she mourned her lost family. Jodi stared ahead, her face a mask of resignation. The aftermath splintered the Frankes beyond repair. Kevin filed for divorce on November 14, 2023, seeking sole custody of the minors and no contact with Ruby. He moved back into the Springville home, its walls now silent, and began therapy with Abby and Julie. Sherry published The House of My Mother on January 15, 2025, a 300-page memoir exposing Ruby's early violence, slaps, hair-pulling, and nights spent standing in corners as punishment. She recounted piano lessons where Ruby's hand crashed beside her fingers, a threat of worse to come, and called for a ban on family vlogging, her words sparking congressional hearings. Ruby's parents and sisters, estranged since 2019, issued a statement blaming Jodi's cult-like hold, though they admitted Ruby's stubbornness had always simmered beneath her piety. In prison, Ruby and Jodi were housed in separate wings of the Utah State Correctional Facility, Ruby in a 6x8 cell with a steel bunk, Jodi in isolation after inmate threats. Ruby enrolled in a sociology course, her letters to Kevin, pleas for forgiveness, returned unopened. Ruby Franke's story is a descent into an abyss of fanaticism, a mother's love twisted into a blade that carved terror into her children's lives. From Tremonton's quiet streets to Ivan's blood-stained floors, her journey traces a path of faith corrupted, control unchecked, and cruelty unleashed. The journals, the ropes, the cries muffled by duct tape, they linger as relics of a nightmare, a warning etched in scars and shattered trust. Her name, once a symbol of family, now evokes a shudder, a tale so dark it defies the light, yet every detail, every tear, every wound, is unrelentingly real.